Some slaps don't just land on skin. They echo through decades, striking at old ghosts and buried legacies. Bennett Kingsley thought he was putting a clerk in her place. He never imagined the woman before him was the living verdict on his family's sins, about to deliver justice from the bench he believed he owned. The federal courthouse corridor held its breath in that suspended silence before a storm. Muffled voices, the frantic buzz of cell phones, lenses poised like predators awaiting carnage. And Bennett Kingsley did not wait. He erupted from Conference Room 4B, his Italian solace cracking against polished marble like gunshots, a wake of anxious lawyers and security in his path. A black woman in a modest navy dress stood before the courtroom doors, speaking in low, measured tones to a clerk, a slender folder in her hands. "Sir, you cannot enter yet," she said, turning to face his advance. "The judge hasn't." He vaporized her words. "You people are always in the way," Bennett seethed. And then he moved. His palm cut through the air, a sharp, sickening report echoing off the walls. The slap connected with her cheek. The hallway froze, phones jerked upward. A collective gasp traveled like a shockwave. Did he just? The woman staggered, her hand flying to her face. But she did not cry out. She did not push back. Slowly, she straightened, her eyes finding his. The calm in her gaze was so absolute, it chilled him for a fractured second. He sneered to cover his own tremor. "You don't touch me. You don't speak to me." "Move," he barked. "You're a clerk." "Act like it." The real clerk beside her whispered, horrified. "She's not a clerk." Bennett didn't hear, but the cameras did. And in less than 10 minutes, the man who had just assaulted her would be commanded to rise when she entered courtroom 3C. Imani Rhodes's never sought the spotlight. She was forged in quiet places. Her childhood home in Southeast D.C. was a sanctuary of cinnamon tea and the worn leather of legal texts. Her mother, Dr. Simone Rhodes, a civil rights historian, filled the air with purpose. "Imani, we descend from people who never had a courtroom. So when you enter one, you carry them with you." Her father, Captain Elijah Rhodes, instilled a soldier's discipline. Rhodes don't tremble. Rhodes think. Between them, Imani became something profound, gentle in speech, unbreakable in spirit. But the fire in her soul was lit by her grandfather, Judge Harold Ellington. He brought her to courtrooms before she could read, whispering, "Justice doesn't wear a robe, baby. Justice wears courage." When she was 10, she overheard the conversation that defined her life's path. Her grandfather at the kitchen table, his hands trembling around a mug. "They're still coming for me," he whispered to her mother. "The Kingsleys won't stop. They ruined your name, Dad. What more could they want?" A long, exhausted sigh. "They want me forgotten." Imani peeked around the corner. "Grandpa, who are the Kingsleys?" Judge Ellington covered her small hand with his shaky one. "They are the reason good people must stay brave." She didn't understand it all then, but she understood the devastation in his eyes. Charles Kingsley, a billionaire industrialist, had orchestrated a smear campaign decades prior when Judge Ellington blocked 3 discriminatory policies. Using media, influence, and political puppets, Kingsley had turned a revered judge into a phantom. Cleared, but forever scarred. Imani grew up watching her hero fight shadows. On the day he died, she made a silent vow. "I will finish what he couldn't." She carried that promise through law school, through clerkships, through every case she prosecuted. Her brilliance was noted, but the steel in her spine remained a mystery. 3 weeks before the slap, the president appointed her to the federal bench, the youngest in her district. The torch had been passed. Only her family knew. The announcement was not yet public. Her father hugged her the night she got the call. "You earned this, Judge Rhodes, but be careful. Power terrifies insecure men." Her mother added, her voice a blade wrapped in velvet, "When they underestimate you, don't correct them. Let the truth do the cutting." Every morning, she touched the frame of Judge Harold Ellington's portrait above her desk. "Grandpa," she'd whisper, "I hope I honor you." On the morning Bennett Kingsley struck her, the son of the man who broke her grandfather, she was on her way to take her seat for the very first time. She did not yet know his name. He had no idea who she was, but he was seconds from learning. Judge Imani Rhodes walked into the courthouse that morning, unaware she was stepping onto a battlefield paved long before her birth. The marble gleamed, but beneath it festered decades of corrupt agreements and unspoken hierarchies, a kingdom where men like Bennett Kingsley believed sovereignty was a birthright. As she passed through security, two clerks murmured, "Who's that?" "No idea. A visiting attorney, maybe." "Looks too young to be important." Imani offered a faint, polite smile. It was not returned. Upstairs, the rot was more visible. Bennett Kingsley, billionaire developer, moved through the halls like a monarch, pulling strings, glaring at junior attorneys, his presence a vacuum that swallowed respect. An older judge, known for his flexibility with donors, leaned toward a bailiff. "If Bennett wants this case buried, it'll be buried." The bailiff nodded, swallowing hard. "Yes, Your Honor." Imani heard it. Her steps slowed. So this is the culture. Outside a courtroom, she watched a Latina clerk approach Bennett with a document. "Mr. Kingsley," the judge said. "I don't take instructions from interns," he snapped. "Tell him I need 10 minutes. He walked away before she could explain. A defense attorney whispered to another, "Kingsley owns half the people in this building." "More than half," his colleague replied. Imani's pulse tightened. This was the same arrogance, the same corrosive prejudice that had shattered her grandfather. She met her new courtroom deputy, Denise Harris, a middle-aged black woman with wise, wary eyes. Denise blinked. "You're Judge Rhodes's?" "I am." "You're younger than the rumors." Denise lowered her voice. "Ma'am, this building hasn't seen your kind of backbone in a long time. Be careful." Bennett has influence everywhere. Imani accepted this not as a warning, but as intelligence. As they walked, Denise nodded discreetly toward a huddle of suits. "Kingsley's team. They've been trying to delay the fraud hearing. On what grounds?" "Whatever grounds money can buy." As they neared conference room 4B, the door blasted open, shouting, the slap of frantic footsteps. Bennett's voice boomed. "This hearing is a joke. I don't wait on underpaid clerks." He stormed past, his shoulder nearly clipping Imani's. She held her ground, a rock in his turbulent stream. Her deputy hissed, "That man has assaulted 3 staff members this year." All swept under the rug. Imani's jaw set. Inside the conference room, Federal Prosecutor Anaka Lewis greeted her. "Judge Rhodes is welcome. Brace yourself." Kingsley's father practically built this courthouse. They act like they own it. Imani absorbed the ecosystem. The way bailiffs stiffened when Bennett passed. How clerks fell silent. How junior attorneys made themselves small. This place did not serve justice. It serviced power. And the moment Bennett Kingsley saw her not as the woman he hit, but as the judge holding his fate, the entire machine would begin to fracture. Imani exhaled, long and slow. "Grandpa, I see exactly what you meant." Imani stood outside courtroom 3C, reviewing final notes. 10 minutes until session. No theatrics, no rush. But Bennett Kingsley was a hurricane seeking landfall, and today she was his shore. The sharp, expensive cadence of his approach filled the hall. He barreled toward the doors, his team scrambling behind. "Out of my way!" He barked at the very air. He didn't look at her. "Move," he snapped, waving a dismissive hand. "I need to speak to the judge before this farce begins." Imani lifted her eyes from the folder. "Sir, courtroom access hasn't opened." "You'll have to wait until you people finish delaying?" He scoffed, loud and derisive. Denise inhaled sharply behind her. Imani remained composed. "The judge's schedule isn't determined by—" "Save it," he cut her off, stepping into her space. "I've dealt with your type all morning. Clerks who think a badge makes them important." He jabbed a finger at her folder. What's that? Forms? Copies? You can scurry with your paperwork after you open the door. Mr. Kingsley, you are out of line. Ian? He rolled his eyes, talking over her. I said move. I don't negotiate with staff who don't know protocol. The hallway shifted. A audience formed, breath held. You're probably a diversity hire, he sneered, his voice climbing. Pushed in here to make some administrator's quota look good. Phones rose. 1, 2, 10. Imani did not flinch. Mr. Kingsley, she said, soft as stone. Take a step back now. It was the command that broke his last threat of control. He lunged. Don't you give me orders, clerk. His hand shot up. The slap was not dramatic, but precise, humiliating. A sound that sickened the very air. Imani staggered half a step. Denise gasped. Shouts erupted. Hey, are you insane? Record that. But Imani did not fall. She did not shout. She steadied her breath, straightening slowly, her eyes locking onto his with a calm that spoke of deep ancestral resilience. Bennett heaved. You don't touch me. You don't talk to me. When I say move, you move. Understand, clerk? Denise's urgent whisper cut through. She's not a clerk. Bennett didn't hear. Are you finished, Mr. Kingsley? Imani asked, her voice level. Cameras rolled. He opened his mouth to spit more venom, but the bailiff stepped between them. Sir, you need to stand down. I'll stand down when this nobody learns. His lead attorney grabbed his arm, face pale as death. Bennett. Stop talking. Why? The attorney's terrified eyes flicked to Imani's folder, to the embossed gold seal, to the 3 words at the top. United States District Court. Judge Imani Rhodeses. Bennett's face transformed. Confusion. Dread. The first icy trickle of realization. It was far too late. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to LostBlack for more dark and emotional stories. Ellison, jaw clenched, sweat beading at his temples. What's the delay? Bennett snapped. Where is the judge? I don't have all day. Mark didn't answer. He just stared at the judge's empty bench, bracing for impact. The door behind the bench opened. Judge Imani Rhodeses entered. The courtroom rose as one. Every attorney, every clerk, every spectator, except Bennett. He froze, the blood draining from his face as recognition delivered its brutal blow. That's... He stammered. Mark's voice was desert dry. That's the judge, Bennett. Judge Imani Rhodeses. The woman you slapped. Bennett's knees nearly buckled. Imani moved to the elevated bench, her black robe flowing like a silent tide. Her posture was regal, her expression a mask of profound, unreadable calm. She surveyed the room, and her gaze finally anchored on him. He saw no rage there. Something far worse, recognition, memory, and the absolute clarity of judgment. Court is now in session, the bailiff announced. Bennett flinched. Be seated, Imani said. The room obeyed. Bennett sank into his chair, his bones feeling like liquid. She opened the case file with deliberate precision. Case number 221873, United States versus Bennett Kingsley. Charges include wire fraud, obstruction, and tampering with federal investigations. This is a pre-trial hearing on the defendant's motion to dismiss. Bennett's throat closed. She wasn't just any judge. She was his judge. Mark leaned forward. Your Honor, if I may. Imani raised a single hand. Before we begin, she said, her voice winter steel, a matter must be addressed on the record. The air tightened. This morning, I was assaulted in the courthouse hallway by the defendant, Mr. Kingsley. He struck me under the mistaken impression I was staff. Racially charged language was used. Multiple recordings exist. Gasps erupted. Bennett's eyes widened. I didn't know, I thought. Silence. The word cut like a whip. He obeyed. Ordinarily, she continued, unwavering, this warrants contempt. However, I have elected not to recuse myself. I have consulted judicial ethics rules. Justice is best served by my continued oversight. Mark jolted. Your Honor, given the incident. Counselor, she interrupted, her tone low. Your client's actions do not intimidate me. The rules permit this. We proceed. She let the declaration hang. Bennett looked faint. For the record, Imani said, her voice softening only a fraction, I am Judge Imani Rhodes's granddaughter of Judge Harold Ellington. A ripple of shock moved through the room. My grandfather's career and health were destroyed by a smear campaign orchestrated by the defendant's father. History remembers that injustice. A stunned hush descended. Bennett's lips parted in utter horror. Mark whispered, Oh my God. I do not hold the sins of the father against the son, Imani said, her eyes sharpening. But I do uphold the law. Today, Mr. Kingsley learns he is accountable like any other citizen. She lifted her gavel. We proceed. Bennett finally understood. He hadn't slapped a clerk. He'd slapped the judge who held his future, the granddaughter of the man his family broke. The calm in her eyes wasn't mercy. It was justice, patiently sharpening its blade. The moment the gavel fell, a dreadful electricity settled over the courtroom. Bennett breathed in shallow, panicked hitches. His empire was now subject to the woman he'd tried to erase with a backhand. Mr. Ellison, preliminary remarks, Imani stated, her hands resting lightly on the bench, echoing her grandfather's taut poise. Mark stood, tugging his tie. Your Honor, given the incident, we request leniency in today's proceedings. Leniency. She repeated the word as if tasting something bitter. For a man facing 9 federal counts. Mark fell silent. Bennett leaned in, teeth clenched. Fix this. She's biased. Imani's voice sliced through. Defendant Kingsley, every word is on the record. Choose wisely. He jolted back. She lifted a file. Let the record reflect the government has submitted supplemental evidence. She tapped the cover. Mark blanched. Supplemental we haven't seen. You have now. She opened it. Bennett's face turned to ash. Exhibit A, emails showing intentional manipulation of charitable funds. Gasps. Exhibit B, communications detailing suppression of whistleblowers. The gasps grew louder. Bennett sputtered. No, those weren't supposed to. Injustice has a way of resurfacing, Mr. Kingsley, Imani said, not raising her voice. Especially when arrogance accelerates it. A spectator muttered, He's finished. Bennett slammed a fist on the table. That was years ago. I was a kid. Imani leaned forward. And your financial reports show you continued the patterns, exploiting the same communities your father harmed. Mark pulled his sleeve. Stop talking. But Bennett unraveled. You don't get to judge me. You're only here because the system felt sorry for you people. Dead silence. Phones lifted. A reporter choked. Imani didn't flinch. Let the record reflect the defendant has made additional racially charged statements in open court. Bennett froze, realizing his own trap. She lifted another document. Exhibit C, a sealed affidavit from a former employee detailing bribery, threats, and coercion tied directly to you. No, how did you? She closed the folder gently. Corruption is loud. It leaves footprints. She looked at him, and for the first time, her voice held a trace of personal gravity. This courtroom is not your boardroom. Your money does not intimidate this bench. Your lineage does not grant immunity. Bennett sagged backward, a man watching his own collapse in real time. Today, she said, with the same calm she held in the hallway, you are not your father's heir. You are a defendant. A tear of sheer rage streaked down his cheek. The gallery simmered with whispered vindication. Judge Rhodes simply said, we move to testimony. For the first time in his life, Bennett Kingsley knew. No wealth, no name, no arrogance could save him. The atmosphere in courtroom 3C had shifted from legal proceeding to historic reckoning when the doors opened sharply. 2 federal agents entered, black jackets, stern faces, badges gleaming. A wave of whispers crested. Bennett twisted. What now? Mark Ellison went gray. The forensic report. It must have triggered something. Agent Rivera approached the bench. Your Honor, may we? Imani nodded. Proceed. He handed her a sealed folder. As part of the broader investigation your chambers initiated, we recovered digital archives believed destroyed in the Kingsley Foundation's 1997 system purge. Imani's pulse stuttered. Rivera continued, addressing the room. These archives include communications between William Kingsley and political operatives coordinating the smear campaign that derailed Judge Harold Ellington's federal nomination. A visceral gasp tore through the court. Imani swallowed, feeling a decades-old wound finally begin to knit. Rivera wasn't done. We also found recent files, ledgers, shell corporations. Funds illegally funneled from charities into private Kingsley accounts. Bennett shook his head wildly. No, those were sealed. My father's lawyers said, Mr. Kingsley, Imani's voice was silk over iron. You are not speaking. My father did this, not me. Why am I? Rivera cut him off, clinical. Your father started it. You continued it. Transfers in your name date, back 14 months. The courtroom reaction was a unified shudder. Rivera handed Imani a second document. A sworn statement from a former Kingsley accountant. It outlines how Mr. Kingsley personally ordered the destruction of the final active case file on Judge Ellington's wrongful prosecution. The same file your office requested during your clerkship, Judge Rhodes's. Bennett whispered, That's a lie. Imani's voice dropped into a register that would haunt the room. You hid evidence. Evidence tied to the man whom raised thee mother. The man whose life your father shattered. A judge. An advocate. My grandfather. She let the weight of it press down. The Department of Justice is now pursuing additional charges. Destruction of government records, perjury, conspiracy. Bennett collapsed into his chair. The dynasty was crumbling. Mark muttered, defeated. It's over, Bennett. They have everything. Judge Rhodes's, Rivera said. The DOJ requests immediate remand pending expanded indictment. Imani nodded. So ordered. Her gavel fell. It echoed like fate. This was no longer a hearing. It was the fall of an empire built on lies, and the rise of a granddaughter carrying her ancestors' truth into the light. After the agent stepped back, Imani signaled the clerk. Enter the certified documents into the record. A heavy, leather-bound folder was brought forward. Inside were the resurrected ghosts, the files that proved her grandfather's innocence. Imani opened it. Her throat tightened. There, in her grandfather's own script, was his final unbowed statement. Truth bends, but it does not break. She whispered back, You didn't break. And today, you rise. Addressing the gallery, her voice clear and unwavering, she declared, These files confirm Judge Harold Ellington was a victim of political sabotage. His reputation was destroyed to protect the Kingsley Empire. She paused, letting the truth settle. This court formally enters into the record that Judge Ellington's name is cleared. His nomination stands as wrongfully denied. A reporter hissed, We need to run this now. Additionally, Imani continued, Given the evidence, all cases tied to Kingsley Foundation misconduct are hereby unsealed. Mark buried his face in his hands. That's every case for a decade. The DOJ attorney nodded sharply. And everyone will be prosecuted. The agents approached Bennett. Mr. Kingsley, you are remanded. His voice cracked, a last pathetic defense. You're destroying my life. Imani looked down, her gaze unforgiving. No, Mr. Kingsley. I am correcting the record. Your father destroyed lives. You continued his legacy. Today, that legacy ends. As security escorted him out, his shouts echoed down the hall. This isn't over. Imani closed the master file. It is, she said, to no one but herself. A soft applause began in the back, then it spread. The entire courtroom rose, Not in chaos, but in profound reverence, not for vengeance, but for truth finally standing upright. The weeks that followed moved like a tide of justice. The DOJ launched a full probe. Victims from decades past emerged. A federal ethics committee issued a public apology to Judge Ellington's family. The hashtag Judge Ellington rises trended, with Imani at the center, the steady, disciplined heir to a legacy the system tried to bury. When asked by the press how it felt to clear her grandfather's name, she replied simply, "I didn't clear it. He lived honorably. I merely turned the lights on." At sunset, Judge Imani Rhodes stood on the courthouse steps, the restored ruling clasped to her chest. Cameras flashed, but she looked past them toward the fading gold sky. Her mother embraced her. He'd be proud. Imani exhaled, the way her grandfather taught her to breathe through storms. Below, Bennett Kingsley was loaded into a black SUV, wrists cuffed, still shouting into the void. His noise faded beneath the weight of his own collapse. She didn't watch him leave. She looked forward. Today wasn't about revenge. It was about restoration. The law doesn't always bend toward justice on its own. Sometimes it needs a steady hand, a fearless heart, and a legacy worth fighting for. Because sometimes justice doesn't roar. Sometimes it walks quietly back into the room, wearing your face, holding the truth your enemies tried to bury. And sometimes the granddaughter of the man they destroyed becomes the judge who finishes the story.